Rashmi Narzary won the Sahitya Academy Award for English Children's Literature for her book His Share of Sky. Her work is being taught in universities and researched for doctoral thesis, while some have been translated into other Indian and foreign languages. She has done extensive communications and creative writing mentoring and workshops globally, ranging from an age group of 10 years up to university faculty. Her other awards include the FICCI Book of the Year 2025 in fiction for Whistles of the Sifung, Tales from Assam's Boro Heartland. The Delhi Literature Festival Award 2025 for Whistles of the Sifung, Tales from Assam's Boro Heartland. The work has received rave reviews and is being resourced for dissertations. The Prague Prerona, I hope that's right, Award for Literature in 2020. Her debut novel, Bloodstone, is a literary, socially and academically acclaimed work that has inspired research papers on gender studies, reimagination of mythology, and women's issues. And a couple of other books which she has also published, among others, which have been among her noted works. So Rashmi, starting off with you, I noticed that, of course, the Whistles of the Sifung has received quite a lot of acclaim. And I'm glad to know that because it is one of my favorite books from you. In fact, it is very charming. But I mean, from a reader's perspective, it's one of the most accessible. I wouldn't even call it a children's book. It is very much something that anyone can read at any age. So I remember because I knew you. I remember reading it and thinking, okay, I had no idea that she was, she had woven so much of folklore into it. And more than folklore, it's something very personal, I feel. And I just wanted you to expand on what brought you to write this really enchanting novel, Whistles of the Sifung.
Thank you so much, Mona, for the question. And it's always easier to talk about your own book. And the best part of writing a book is writing the book. And then the later part is, of course, it gets more difficult by the day. You have to look for a publisher. Preeti, help me here. You have to look for a publisher. And then the even more difficult part becomes when you're facing an audience and the audience start analyzing your work in a way that you haven't thought of it. So Whistles of the Sifung comes in the form that the Boros have a lot of beautiful folklore and legends surrounding some of our hills, because the hills and the nature around our places, we consider them sacred. We consider them our father, our mother, our ancestors. We are because of them. Now the point is, these legends are getting buried, these legends are getting lost, and most of them are being stocked away in academic archives, because the moment they come into the form of journals and academic research papers, we, especially people like me, laymen like me, we think these are very high stuff and high intelligence, very difficult kind of source material, which is not in our reach. But then when I started hearing about these same things from old people in the village, I found them very interesting. So my first impression was that, Mona, if the same legends and folklore and the information can be presented, can be put out into the world in the form of stories, rather than information and lessons, I think it will be easier for people to understand, to retain, and to relate perhaps. And storytelling also comes in the form not just for folklore and all. Marketing is the latest that is taking the world on. What do we do for marketing? We're telling stories. When we're marketing a product, we're telling stories about it. A part of it is true, a part of it is not true. And whatever part is true, if it stays on and if the truth is maintained, it becomes a legend. So this is all about storytelling. I think deep rooted, we tell stories because first of all we like to chronicle our history, and we in the Northeast, we have this habit of tying our children when we are working, when women are working in the fields, in the kitchen, or in their courtyards. If we have little children, we tie them cozily on our backs with a warm shawl. While the child is sleeping, or even if it's awake, the mother will sing songs, consciously or unconsciously. I mean, she's singing songs to it, she's telling tales to it. In the process, she is passing on information about her culture, about her history, about her traditions to the child, and the child carries it on forward. And which is why I feel we tell stories to, keep a tradition alive. We tell stories to help ourselves heal if we are talking about hurt. Like for instance, this is a very personal thing. Now, of course, I can talk about it because I have healed from inside. My first short story I wrote after my first miscarriage. I have had a number after that. But the first short story came after my miscarriage. Now that I have healed, I wrote a story after it. And every time I read the story, I thought, okay, so many more, because so many people have read that story and come and told me, Rashmi, I too have gone through these pains. So I know that there are more people suffering with me. And then in the process, I healed, which is why we need to tell our stories. We need to weave our stories, let people know. So people will also tell their stories to us. And then I think we will come again to Whistles of the Sifu later on.
Okay, I think that's fine. Rashmi, that was very interesting and quite inspiring, I must say. I mean, we don't really hear so many notes of positivity, especially after something like that. So I'm glad you touched on that, and we'll go back to it, circle back to it later, like vultures. And so I'll just introduce our other invitee, Dr. Margaret Pachuau. Margaret Pachuau is a professor at the Department of English and Culture Studies, MZU, of Mizoram University. She is an alumnus of JNU. Her research interests are fiction, translation, and culture studies. Her academic writings have been published by Bloomsbury, Routledge, Oxford, Cambridge, and Springer. Her translations have been published by Katha in The Heart of the Matter and Writers' Workshop. She won the first prize for fiction in translation in 2008 in a competition organized by Muse India, a literary e-journal for translating Lam Kwang by Van Tuanga from Mizo to English. Her forthcoming publications include a book on Mizo cultural narratives to be published by Bloomsbury, and the translation of a novella authored by Padma Shri James Dokuma to be published by Sahitya Academy. She is also the recipient of the Sparrow Literary Award 2025 in the genre for folklore literature. The award was shared with Professor Esther CM from Meghalaya. So, okay, that is also a very impressive list of accomplishments. And I would like to ask Professor Margaret, sorry for the small, I mean, it's been quite a few years, so I really want to ask you, as a very experienced, perhaps the most experienced translator of Mizo tales, Mizo folklore, and Mizo stories as a whole, literature as a whole over here, where your experience is, and you have received accolades for. And I do believe that quite a few writers that I know personally have described your translations as exquisite, which I think was, I mean, it was really good to hear that. So, in the first place, thank you from our side for doing so much work. So, I'd really like to ask you how you've been translating for how many years, and what has that taught you about literature as a whole, Mizo, in the context of Mizoram, and about the oral nature of most Mizo stories. So if you'd like to care to expand on that a bit.
Thank you so much, Mona. And it's such a pleasure to be here on this panel, along with you and also with Rashmi. I embarked on the journey with regards to translation way back in the year 2002. At that point in time, there was very little that had been done in terms of translations, that is especially from Mizo to English and also the other way around, English to Mizo. So where I translate is predominantly from Mizo to English. And there were very, very few publications that had been there. We actually have, but I must start off by saying, and I do this whenever I'm asked a question about translations, we have a very pioneering translator, Padma Shri awardee, Professor Laltwang Lianakyangte. He's from the Department of Mizo, and he had published, when we were in JNU, and I was doing my MA at that point in time, Professor Kyangte had published a book called Folk Tales from Mizoram. He had published it on his own at that time, and then later on, of course, it was done by Sahitya Academy. So at that point, it was only Professor Kyangte who embarked on the aspect of translating from English to Mizo to English. And then, of course, we had Professor Margaret Zama from the department, and she was very much senior to us, and she is now superannuated and retired from the department. Katha from Delhi had a project, and it comprised at that point in time all the states of the Northeast. So there were different kinds of genres in the form of folklore and short stories and even novellas also. So they were at that initially they had expected to come out with 5 volumes, and stories from from Mizoram were also chosen for that. So Professor Zama and myself were selected as translators. So to cut a long story short, it began at that time. It was obviously a very laborious project, and we had workshops in different parts of Northeast India, and also it wound up in New Delhi. And then after that, I got involved with some translations from Sahitya Academy, went to workshops, and then with that level of confidence, and it's very difficult to be confident, especially in terms of translation, I embarked on my own, started my translations, and did a couple of publications with Writers' Workshop, predominantly on folklore first, and then after that on contemporary aspects of Mizo. And so that has basically been it. And in the year 2008, and you mentioned that, Mona, as a part of my bio, Muse India, which is a literary e-journal, some of us sitting here may be familiar with it, they had launched a nationwide competition for fiction in translation. So I entered a Mizo story written by one of our contemporary writers, Van Kluanga. He was at that, not any longer now because he's very seasoned now, but at that point in time, one would say up and coming as a writer. And the only reason why I entered into that particular short story competition was not so much in terms of winning the prize, that was never there in my mind, but because wherever we went, people would always tell us that we've got so many Padma Shri awardees, we've got people who've gotten the Bhasha Saman awarded, so many times, Sangeet Natak awards also, but our writers were not read at all because they were not in translation. So I just thought that, if I sent in that, at least people would know who a Mizo was or where Mizoram was, and also facets to, what our nomenclature was, for example, Mizo names and things like that. I did that predominantly because I felt that the culture deserved a wider ambit. So I did that, and of course it was a very pleasant surprise to win the prize also, the first prize. I was happy about it, I still am. And that is basically how it has been. The cultural aspect of, the aspect of bringing in the culture to the ambit of translation for a wider audience. And that is how my journey into translation has been.
Thank you, Margaret, for the very illuminating, response on that. And in fact, it just struck me that we have two very important aspects of storytelling as a whole. Rashmi, with your concentration on the younger folk, which I think is very important, knowing that everyone everywhere is having problems with kids, children being stuck in their digital quagmire and everything. So, and it's so important. It really struck me that you actually do workshops for children, I believe, for as young as 10 and so on. Yes, I had no idea actually about that. That is something that I've just learned as well. And I find it quite exciting. So could you just elaborate a little bit more on your experience with that, and whether how you see your role as a storyteller to propagate the art and the art of storytelling in the traditional ways, because I think even writing might be almost said to be traditional at this point, since so many other media have come out. So if you could just elaborate a little bit on that.
Thank you, Mona. Because storytelling and mentoring children on story writing or storytelling is also a lay. It's a bridge. Yes, it's a bridge. It's a bridge lay. It's a connect lay. We stay grounded lay. So this is what I picked up from Maruata this morning. He was just describing lay. So I said, yes, exactly, this is what I do, storytelling, and this is what I do, mentoring. And especially that bridge from my generation to my generation, storytelling is not lay. It is just a conversation maybe. But when I tell my stories, when I try to teach the other generation, the younger generation, to tell stories from their people, from their land, that is lay. So I just realized once, we have in PTR in Kokrajhar, there is this hill we call the Baukhungri Hill. There is a festival surrounding the hill where during April, just during the Bihus, there is a hill climbing celebration there. So a large number of especially young people with their lovers and with their partners would climb the hill, and they know that they do that because of fulfillment of their love, and that their love gets everlasting. But they don't know the backstory of it. There have been academic researchers and all. So like I told you, they have been researched, the legends have been stacked into archives. Then I thought, let me just find out what's about this Baukhungri Hill, and then let me tell children about it. So in one of the workshops, I started telling them, why do you climb the hill? They said, oh, because there is a fair going on there, they sell ice creams and they sell good momos. Pretty, they do sell good momos there. So let me also tell you, because I did tell them about the Baukhungri Hill climbing in that workshop, so I'm just coming to that. So the legend is like this, that Baukhungri, Khungri is princess in Boro, and Bao means renunciation. So it is a hill where a princess had renounced her life because she found out that her lover, who was the prince of a neighboring kingdom, had fallen martyr in battle. And there is a long backstory to it. So this princess, she was the daughter of Daukha. Now there is the legend that some stories say, is it the same king as Daksha, King Daksha? And is this one princess King Daksha's daughter? So we don't know if legends are the same, because we have the same story being told in different forms and in different names across the Himalayan belt. So when this princess came to know that her lover had been killed in battle, she didn't know what to do with her life. She didn't know how to go on living. So she ran up the hill in disheveled hair and crying and looking for her lover. And once she reached the top of the hill, once she reached the peak, and there was no more else to run to, she flung herself down from the hill. And there is a pond there. They still call it the Diplai pond because the princess's name was Princess Diplai. So I was asking the children, if it is about everlasting love, if you climb the hill to find everlasting love, how is it that the princess had killed herself by throwing herself from the peak and they have not united? Her lover had died in battle. She had killed herself by throwing herself from the hill. So how is it about everlasting love? Then one of the smart kids says, maybe they got united in death. And I was surprised. The legends say precisely that once you're united in death, then nothing can do you apart. Nothing can do you apart. Which is why the legend still holds that when you climb the hill during April Bihu for 3 consecutive years, you're going to find everlasting love. Yes. So if any of you haven't yet found your everlasting love, you can come to Kokrajhar and you can try climbing Baukungri Hill. So Whistles of the Sifung has drawn from this particular legend. However, I have made imaginary characters there and planted them there. So my stories there are not folklore. I cannot rewrite folklore. I have drawn from them and I have had imaginary characters and they form the story. Now about workshops with little children. The other day I was in a school talking to children about the latest book, The Lost Soul of the Jokure, which has a few lines by Gulzar Saab. He has appreciated the book and I'm very humbled and I'm happy to say this before you that he had put these few lines on top of the book. So yeah, when I was talking about this book to the children, so impromptu the children come up with their own endings. I was just leaving it loose. I said, what would happen if there is a soul in a scooped out dry gourd shell? Who can answer me? So I just put it. It was a group of children from classes 5 to 8, like that. My God, the wacky kind of imagination they had come up with. I would have loved to write a story with each one of those replies. So you see, workshops actually bring out certain things in them. Yeah. And of course, you have to mold the workshop according to the age of the children. So I find workshops really interesting. They tend to learn more. In fact, one kid was telling me, oh, there's something like this we learned in one of our textbooks. He doesn't remember what he actually learned in the textbook, but the moment we discussed about it in the workshop, he remembered it. And he's going to retain it all his life, I hope. Yeah, so that's the power of workshops and storytelling. They retain.
You know, before we move on, I would like to tell you rather, that Whispers of the Sifu, whistles, I'm sorry, I keep on saying whispers. I must be, wanting to run up that certain mountain or whatever it is for 3 consecutive days. Whispers of the heart. So anyway, the Whistles of the Sifu. I was reading it and I'm not sure that we have ever had the opportunity to, tell you that I have an abiding interest in anime, and I kept seeing Sifu, the entire novel, as a kind of a slice of life anime. You might have seen them, and it was so beautiful. It was like watching a Ghibli movie, actually, for me.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm honored, Mona. I'm honored and I'm humbled. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So, thank you very much for your responses. And in fact, we might circle back to that again later. But right now, I would like to go on to Professor Margaret. So, Professor, I would like to ask you, after your, since you have extensive experience with translations and with Mizo literature as a whole, and you live here. So you have, I do not need to tell anyone that you have a very in-depth experience of life here and so on. So I was very curious because I know that you are on a sabbatical. You have been for quite a while. In fact, the entire city knows. So, so I was wondering, but I never asked you, what you were working on. So if you could give us a few words about what your forthcoming work might be about. Is it a novel? Is it something else? Because I'm very keenly curious about it, and I'm probably going to be lining up with the bookshop first in line and so on.
I'll catch you on that one. If I don't see you lining up in the bookshops, I'll see. I think it's all being recorded, so I'm safe anyway. Thank you for the question, Mona. I'm working on a book. I have been working on a book since, since last June. I joined the university back in this particular June. It's a non-fictional work on aspects predominant to religion and also the cultural narratives, particularly to the people of this region, that's the Mizos. And it's going to be published by Bloomsbury, and hopefully, and I've been working on it for a while, when I say I'm working on it, it's actually the writing of the book that I'm talking about. The book, the idea of the whole thing and its actual progression took place quite a few years back, because I had been awarded a couple of UGC major research projects, which I had based on the concepts of religion and also culture and also narratives as they are being linked in terms of the Mizo. So this book is basically an extension of how important religion is and how it has always been so central in the life of the Mizo. And I think it doesn't come as a surprise as such for anyone, because we all understand that, as a state, it's religion that is predominant and pertinent. But I'm not working on it from the archival colonial records and the historical ambit. Rather, I'm trying to transfer that onto a more contemporary ethos, and I'm working on it. It's coming on hopefully well. I'm working on the drafts right now, and I'm looking forward to submitting it soon to my publisher.
I have to thank you so much. That was very unexpected, because I was quite sure that you were working on, your version of Shakespeare's Tempest or something like that. But anyway, I'm very curious. I had no idea that you were interested in that aspect of our life, of Mizo culture or society or whatever you wish to call it, the religious ethos. So can you just? I know that you wouldn't want to spill all the beans before the book comes out, otherwise nobody would get it. But could you just say a little bit more about that? I'm very keen to know. I'm sure everyone else is quite keen to know about that. And you said that it's not from the colonial perspective or anything like that. So
I have deliberately not touched upon the concept of the colonial aspect, because a lot of our writings have been from that particular tangent. Whether it's historical or any aspect from the social sciences, or even people from literature. I come from the literature background, so we cannot help but touch upon that. So I feel that a lot of interpretations, I wouldn't say that it's been overdone, because as a society, we're not too great in terms of writing or publishing, at least from a very research-oriented point of view. So I wouldn't say it's overdone, but a lot of it has been done on that particular point. So, but my take is going to be on the more contemporary ethos, what we feel, whether we feel that it is still relevant, whether religion would be still relevant, and if so, why, and if otherwise, on that particular take, and also clubbing also aspects of orality, because and folklore, which, as you'll understand, is not only what I teach in the classroom, but has actually been predominantly first love for me. So how much these also seep into our culture, seep into that particular tangent, and trying to come to terms with those dynamics.
That's intriguing, and I think you've whetted our curiosity about the book, And I'm so glad that I heard about it, because I would love to read it. I would love to come to your house over a cup of tea and, discuss the tidbits about it and so on. So, yeah, self-inviting myself, which I often do anyway. So, as a final question, since we're nearing the end of this session, since we have to get back to the relevance of storytelling, and I'm sure between the three of us, storytelling might be very relevant. But as I said, what do you see? I remember about 20 years ago they were predicting the demise of books, written books, I mean printed books, that is, and it hasn't, of course, they haven't died. But we do have e-books and so on, which is a different way of reading. I mean, it's still reading. But as I said, is there something that you'd like to say about this, the coming future, the coming years, the future? And we know that how much the internet has woven itself into our lives, to the extent through our phones and so on. I've been waving it around like anything. I'm so sorry about that. But so what you see in terms of storytelling, do you think that the advent of, for example, AI could stunt the human imagination, our capacity for it, for children and so on? Rashmi, this is a question especially to you, but obviously I do want your input on that as well.
Thank you, Mona. AI doesn't know about the Balkhugri Hills. AI doesn't know about the W's and the J's and the Z's that come in the borrow spellings. AI gets all knotted and strangled and suffocated, which is where we need a person to run AI. And because our kind of spellings and our kind of pronunciations is a hammer on the head of AI. So I say AI, authenticate artificial intelligence first, and then you proceed with your whatever you're doing with AI. You can definitely take the help of AI, looking for spellings. Like earlier when we were small, to know about something, to know about someone, we would have to rush to the library, because we wouldn't have the money to buy out all the books about that person or that topic. But yes, you can Google, you can AI for all that. But for someone at 55 years, I understand the difference between something written actually by a person, a sensitive person, and something written by ChatGPT or AI. So there is that difference. And storytelling, yes, in a way, a lot of people are using AI for reviewing. For reviewing they are, but they cannot produce, I think. So. AI is not in any way coming in the way of our storytelling, as long as we are telling honestly about our people, our land, and we are honestly trying to build the lay.
A beautiful answer from Rashmi Narzary. It's always heartening to know that people are not giving up on just being human as such, because AI is something that is going to come in more and more numbers. So your thoughts on this as a teacher, a very long time teacher, professor in the university, and as a writer and translator, where do you stand with this?
See, as far as the creative and the fictional, I'll leave it to what Rashmi had said. I agree with that. But when it comes to research and when it comes to teaching, I think it's extremely disturbing, because there is we as faculty, we have been attending workshops online, offline, thinking about what to do with AI, and it's very, very difficult. Because there are now, especially in Mizoram, there are colleges also which have totally banned assignments and are looking only for the regular tests, because how much can you determine? And also when we have, for example, when we write dissertations and theses, we have plagiarism checks. But then there are some who cannot, the plagiarism checks work very well, but then there are some checkers which do not detect AI. There are some, so it's very difficult. So it hampers also a lot in terms of the academia, and you cannot distinguish who's brilliant, whose genius it is, and also whose AI it is and what's not. So I just feel that it's a little difficult. But I also have attended workshops in IIT also where, where you have the cream of the cream telling you all that it's very difficult. There's nothing that can be done about it. That's one. The other thing also is that what I find very disheartening is that, I know personally of a lot of people who gets their works published, even the academic, what passes off as academic, not just creative, but even the academic. And because the publishers do not have the AI checks, anything goes. So I think it's extremely disheartening because we've got so much of talent. We've got so many who do not use AI, are not getting published, especially with the big time publishers. And then you have people who have the connections because they know people, but they use AI and still get published. And I think there the scenario becomes extremely disheartening.
So on this, on a note of both pessimism and hope, I think we can draw this session to a close because I believe there might be a bit of a Q&A. And thank you, Rashmi. Thank you, Margaret. It was a delight to talk to you. I wish we had more time, in fact, but I'm sure that people would be cursing us, if we sat here and just chatted on. Yes, absolutely. Okay, thank you so much. Any questions? Oh.
Maybe a simple question. Hello, ma'am. Hello, Rashmi. This is a question I would like to ask Rashmi, since I can ask ma'am at the department anytime. Rashmi, in the beginning of the conversation, you talked about how your process of telling your story helped you heal, and how it also helped other women heal through the connection. However, in the meantime, many women are reluctant to tell and share our stories for the fear of being called weak and sometimes not resilient enough, especially in relation to experiences which are commonplace in the society, considered as commonplace in the society. So what do you think about that, and how do you think we can encourage more women to tell their stories?
This is actually a very personal, and the way I feel, someone else may not feel like that. The same medicine may work for me, may not work for someone else. So I feel we can again just form a group, maybe talk to the person, let the person not tell her story. You can tell your story to the person. Even listening heals sometimes, because there is music. We listen to music. We don't sing to the song back. We just listen to the song and we are healed. Some wounds are healed just listening. So maybe our storytelling will heal that person. That person need not tell the story. In my case, I told my story for other people to hear. But in someone else's case, maybe they would like to just listen and be healed. Right? So I hope if there are wounded hearts anywhere here, God heal them all. Yeah. And in this book, I'm just taking, Pratap, I'm taking a few more minutes extra. So in this book, Whistles of the Siphon, there is one particular story which is called Nurture, which is, it draws from this particular story where they climbed the Balkungri hill. There was this woman who had found her love climbing the Balkungri hill. Then she prayed for a child climbing the Balkungri hill. Then she conceived, and so she was to go and offer her prayers. There is a Shiva temple at the top of the hill. So she goes to offer her prayers there. And as she climbs, she hears the whistles of the sifung. Sifung is the flute in Boro. So there is this particular old man, Ojai. Ojai plays such wonderful flute that it brings the divine to earth. So when she hears it, she gets very excited and she says, "Oh my God, this is Abo Ojai. Abo Ojai. Abo is grandfather. This is Abo Sifung. This is Abo Ojai. I must go and listen to him." So in her process of climbing the hill, she stumbles, she falls, and then she gets unconscious. So her husband and his friends, they get worried because she's already with child. They are worried that they might lose the child. So they come down hurriedly, they take her to the hospital, and in the on the journey to the hospital, in the ambulance, she insists that Abo Sifung, Abo, the old man who plays the flute, he also sits in the ambulance with her and plays for her. So the old man, out of his anxiety, out of his grief and fear that because of him this woman had fallen and is about to perhaps or may have already lost her child, he plays. But by the time they reach the hospital, the woman and everyone thinks the child is no more, and Abu goes back to his village. So many months later, it is again Bihu time. This old man's daughter-in-law comes rushing inside and says, "Father, father, there is someone coming to meet you." And they have bundles with them. So the old man goes out and he sees that it is that particular woman, young woman with her husband, and they each is carrying a baby. You know, her baby wasn't lost. She had actually delivered twins, and the doctor had said something miraculous had happened. Something had put the trauma in the fetus into anesthesia. Something very soothing, something very calming. Was it some smell? Was it some touch? Or was it some music? The doctor was asking. So the husband then says, "Oh yes, it must be music," because the old man was sitting and playing his flute. So this is it, you know, sometimes you don't have to tell, you just have to listen and you are healed. I'm sorry, Pratap, I took some extra time.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes?
I hope I have answered
Very simple question for both. Ms. Rashmi, you talked about talking about your miscarriage and all. I have a friend who has stopped writing journals because she says that it makes her writing the journal has made it difficult for her to move on from certain experiences because it made her relive certain traumas. So in your experience, when you write about your experiences, like which has caused you pain in the past and all, how much of it is about reliving the trauma, reliving the pain in the process, and how much of it is cathartic? I'm just curious. And for Professor Margaret, about translation, nowadays there's a lot of translation work. People are translating songs, novels, a lot of translating work out there. In your opinion, how much of it do you think should be regulated, and how much should be given free rein regarding translation work?
Thank you. It all depends on how you look at it, you know. If I'm constantly talking about only that one particular part, about the grief part, I think I will drown and dwell more in it. So storytelling comes in the form that I add characters to it. So I start thinking how towards a positive end. because ultimately my purpose is to heal myself and to heal all those who read the story. So I start adding characters. It is like manifestation. In manifestation, you know, we start thinking of a thing in the present. Like we don't ask, please give me this. We start thinking as we already have it. So in storytelling, in the healing process, I start adding characters to it, and I start taking it like, okay, that was an accident, maybe something bad would have happened to that child. So maybe you conceive again, maybe there are happier times, and this child is a very cheerful, naughty, mischievous child, which is why, you know, God designed it this way. So whatever we plan might have something wrong in it, something faulty in it, but when God plans it, maybe He does it better for us. So a lot of it is, yes, healing, a lot of it is cathartic. It all depends on how you frame your story, how you want to move ahead in life. I think in your subconscious, deep inside you, you know how you want to move ahead. Whether you want to continue being submerged in your grief, or you want to put the past behind and move on to happier times. This is how you write your story, this is how you heal yourself, and yes, I hope I have answered. And okay, let's not just talk about grief and healing. There is so much more to stories and folklore, you know. Let's also talk about it. But I'm so happy, at least something came out of my writing, something came out of my first short story, in fact. I hope God helps you heal, or your friends to heal. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I'll just be very brief. If I understood right, it was with regards to translation and, you know, how much of it should, I don't really, you know, since you haven't expounded on which context you were talking about, it's still fine. All that I'm saying is that I am a translator. I am no authority on censorship and how much should be translated, how much should not be translated. All I just feel is that if anyone translates and propagates aspects of the culture, I think that is well and good.
Okay, thank you so much. That was a very interesting session, and I'll be sure to take it up backstage with Rashmi and Margaret. And yes, so thank you.